Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today. Are you hearing us well? If yes, please write something in the chat. Okay, welcome to our EPAM stream, Soft Skill Talks, How to Sound Clear and Persuasive, and we are thrilled to have you join us today. I'm Olga, your host for today's stream, and also I'm a recruiter of EPAM Training Center. We are happy to announce that we are planning to start a new series of streams, and these streams will be focused on soft skills. Because as you know, soft skills are really important for everyone, and especially for engineers, as they help them in various aspects of their life. So please stay tuned for our upcoming events. And what about our agenda? So today we will talk about presentations, and we will help you to learn how to sound clear and persuasive, how to talk about your skills and experiences with confidence. Additionally, we will talk about audience and how to keep it engaged and interested, and also adjust to diverse cultural backgrounds. And finally, our speaker will guide you through different storytelling techniques to make your presentations even more powerful. For those who have just joined our stream, I wanted to share that you are at EPAM stream, Soft Skill Talks, How to Sound Clear and Persuasive, and this stream is hosted by EPAM, a leading global provider of digital services and engineering. So also I would like to tell that today we have a special guest to talk with, and her name is Helena Kushnirevich. So he will share her experience and knowledge today with us. And let's welcome our guest speaker. Helena, could you please briefly introduce yourself to our online audience?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm super excited to be here today to share my humble experience and knowledge in the topic, in the field of presentation and public speaking. So I'm Helena, and I'm a soft skills trainer with two focuses. The first one is cultural intelligence, and the second one is presentation and public speaking. And I've been working with this topic for like 10 years so far, and actually I am absolutely thrilled when I have this opportunity to present, and that's why I'm ready to share what exactly you can gain and you can get when it comes to presentation skills.
Wow, thanks a lot. So it's a pleasure to be with you all today, and I hope that our stream will help you to elevate your public speaking skills and master the art of persuasive and clear presentations. By the way, in the video screen description you can find a lot of useful links, including our social media, useful resources from our speaker, and also you can find different training opportunities for beginners. Okay, and also be attentive, as during our stream you can not only listen to us attentively, but also you can ask your questions using our chat, and our support team will be happy to answer your questions. Try to ask the most interesting question, and we will take it online. And also, for the most inspiring and exciting questions, you can get a prize that will surprise, and this prize is a one-year LinkedIn Learning subscription. So I wish you good luck, and let's get started. Helena, you know, I'm always thinking about presentation skills, and I understand that nowadays it's really important to share the information and ideas in a clear way, especially with colleagues and in a team. And this made me curious about presentation skills in general. What is it, and how they help us to succeed in different situations?
Nice question to start with.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to presentation skills, there are a few actually. So the first and the most important is to actually be able to transmit your ideas in a clear way and in a persuasive way, right? These are two targets that we are having when we are, speaking to someone. And you can use this skill, you can apply these skills in the absolutely loads of situations. Look, for example, speaking to someone at the interview, to the recruiter during the interview, and you have to be absolutely clear and persuasive for them to hire you. Now, the second situation, for example, if you are still a student, you present something to your peers. If you are a teacher or a trainer, you need to present something to your trainees, like a lecture, right, or a workshop. So there are also presentation skills involved. Now, another situation, if you're at a workplace and you work with a customer or with your team, you also have to be able to get a buy-in for your ideas from a customer, for example, or present your results to your team or somebody else. So this all is, is comprised in one skill of actually speaking clearly and persuasively. And this is the first and the foremost. But there are a couple more. Like second skill, I would, for the second skill, I would put the visualization skill. Because you have to be able not only speak clearly, but you have to also be able to prepare a slide that supports your idea or actually makes clear the very complex concepts, right? So that was the second one. Now, next up, that should be the skill that enables you to engage the audience in the participation in your presentation, right? So you have to be able to somehow communicate with that audience, not only like give this information in bulks, not only, just immerse them in this huge amount of new information, but make sure that they don't fall asleep, right? And communicate with them, ask them questions, or like engage them in the polls and questionnaires and stuff, right? This is the skill of engaging the audience. And my last point here, but not the least one, would be the skill that makes you able to cope with your speaking anxiety, because this public speaking fears is on top of the most typical, the most common fears, right? And it takes second place after the fear of death, I believe, right? And almost all of us is experiencing this speaking anxiety when it comes to some social situations, or when you imagine when you have to do something like this, like we're doing, we all experience this fear of public speaking, even me, somebody who is involved in that. And that's why this last point, which I have to mention when it comes to this presentation skills, would be the ability to deal with your self-regulation, right? And to overcome this speaking anxiety. That's pretty it.
Thanks. And why is it important to develop such skills?
That's a good one, right? Because I love this question, because actually soft skills are really hugely underestimated in the professional field, because the colleagues from different backgrounds believe that the hard skills or technical skills or your professional skills are more important for getting a job, are more important for advancing in your career, getting a better position, getting the leadership position. So they believe that the hard skill is something more important, and that's why they usually tend to underestimate soft skills. And one of the soft skills that they do underestimate is presentation and public speaking. But what happens usually is something that I experienced quite recently. I've experienced quite recently. One of the colleagues came to one of the trainings that I conduct, and when I asked them, I usually ask that at the beginning of the workshop, why are you here? And he told actually that he received the negative feedback of one of the managers because he couldn't present himself, couldn't introduce himself well, and couldn't speak about his experience and expertise in a proper way during the assessment presentation, right? So that was the problem, that the hard skills were fine, right? He got a proper track record. He got nice results on the project, right? But he didn't get these soft skills, like presentation skill. And that is why he couldn't move further. And this thing is something that we have to remember, because usually when people see us, they make some conclusions out of it. And the second thing we do is start speaking. And speaking is also quite an important idea how people make conclusion about us as a person, as a professional, as anybody else, right? And there's interesting statistics from Forbes. It was made by Forbes, the study. And this study told that 70% of working professionals actually think that people, or again, working professionals with strong presentation skills are more likely to get into the leadership positions and are more likely to, gain some other opportunities at work than the people who do not possess the skills. So that's why we sometimes might feel, that we take it for granted. It's just speaking. We can just describe this, right? But actually, there's the bottom side of the iceberg. Understanding how to do the presentation and how to do that effective and efficient presentation so that everybody is clear about what you're saying and everybody is persuaded, right, about the point that you're making.
Yeah, thanks. I think that based on your example, now we understand that presentation skills, they are really important. And just to continue, I know that it's really important to express our ideas, as I said, and especially when we're talking to others in different situations. And sometimes there can be some miscommunication, between colleagues or in a team, for example. And that's why it's because some ideas are not expressed in a clear way, And that's why I'm wondering, probably you have an advice or tips on how to articulate our thoughts in a clear way.
Absolutely, I do have. And moreover, that's quite a typical situation, not only somewhere at work or at the university, but in the general life, in the common life. For example, I noticed such a situation with me and my partner at home. When, for example, I want to understand when he's going to come home in the evening to start preparing dinner. And I'm going to call him and ask, when are you going to be home, right? And what I usually get is something like this, right? He's like, well, I have to drop in at my parents', then I have to drop in at some shop to grab some food, then I have to do this one and that one and that one, and I'm and I'm listening and not receiving the actual answer, actually. And only at the end, he's going to say, okay, so that means that I'm about to reach home at 7 p.m. And that was something that I was waiting for all this situation, for all this conversation. And actually, this situation can be put into some workplace where, for example, the situation is the client, the presentation to a client where the client is expecting the direct response to the question. But someone from the team, they tend to give the details, loads details. And then they get distracted, digress, and they forget about the question itself. And the customer never receives the answer, and they end up re-asking same question. So that is why what I'm speaking about is that brings me actually to the quote that I love a lot. It is, tell what you're going to tell, then tell it, and then tell what you've just told. And I'm just going to explain this, right? So this quote is believed to belong to Aristotle, but actually it's not true. I did my homework and fact-checked that. And actually this quote belongs to the American pastor. And what he meant was that you have to start with the main idea right away, and to be clear what you are going to say. So not to delay this main message, but put it at the very beginning of your, either that would be a presentation, or the answer to a question, or any other form of like speaking or saying, right? So you put your idea straight away, then you support it with some other message, like context, like details, like something else, and then you return to this idea at the end to reinforce it, like, or to recap it, And following this way of putting your message across, the great way for my partner to answer would be, I'm going to be at home at 7, right? And then the details. And if I need, I'm going to accept those details or ask for some more. And that is the main advice to those who want to be clear in the communication, to start with the main point. So to give the precise answer first, and then go ahead and give some context. That was my point.
That's a nice example. So thank you, Helena, and thank you, our audience, for your questions. And I have one for you. So what do you recommend avoiding complex words if you are speaking in non-native language, or use more complex words to inspire listeners?
An interesting question, but what is meant by complex words? That is interesting to break down this idea. Maybe that's about the language more, like it's about language proficiency more. But what I would answer, actually, you don't have to try and use complex words. And moreover, now there's a trend to simplify your English, because the majority of us here, right, use the English as lingua franca, as the language just to connect, as a common language for understanding each other. And as it's non-native language for us, it should be absolutely accessible, right? So it should be inclusive, so that all can understand that. And sometimes at schools or at universities we're taught this academic English, right? So if you imagine this, the exams like TOEFL or IELTS or stuff, if you want to achieve the greater results there, you have to speak this academic English. But in fact, nobody speaks that, specifically in business, at work, right? And if somebody does, they will be, approached with interest, and of course that sounds in a beautiful way, but you're not making yourself clear, and that is the main goal for us, to be clear for everybody else. So working in the working environment, same as in the studying environment, our main task is not to sound in a beautiful way, but our main task is to absolutely transmit our message in the way that we understand it and to persuade other people. So I would not recommend to use complex words, right, when you are presenting. Moreover, there is the recommendation to avoid idioms, to avoid phrasal verbs, to avoid specific jargon in the international business surroundings, and be absolutely clear and simple. Use simple sentences, simple words, and that would be more than enough.
Yeah, I'm totally agree with you. And I have one more. So how can we effectively handle challenging questions or objections while maintaining clarity and persuasiveness in our responses?
How to handle difficult questions. I love this question a lot. You know why? Because when it comes to presenting skills, what I usually deal with when colleagues prepare the presentation, they consider the preparation the main part, right? Well, I mean the body of the presentation. So they prepare the speech, they prepare the slides, and they maybe rehearse that, maybe practice that, and then they come and to deliver this presentation to their audience. They do their part, and then something else comes, the Q&A session, where they have to tackle the questions, somehow specifically difficult questions, right? Not the question that they would like to hear and they would like to answer, right, to respond. And the way we can deal with those questions is the first one. The recommendation that I usually give: you have to do your homework and anticipate those questions at the stage when you prepare your presentation. And you can actually anticipate up to 80% of the questions you're going to be asked. You know that, absolutely. You can sit down and write down the list of those questions. That would be your first step. Then second step would be to prepare the answers and practice them, so that you could sound in a persuasive way when you are there, ask those questions from anyone, like from your audience, from your customer, from your team, from your managers, for anyone, yeah? And you'll be prepared. That's the easiest way to be ready. Now, of course, there are some techniques to respond to that kind of questions, and you can first the general advice here. I would recommend to, when you are there in the situation when you are asked a question like this, you have to do the first step and just calm down, and don't let the asker get you out of the stability that you have, right? So you can take a couple of breaths and allow yourself this break, right? And I wouldn't say the break, it's just a short pause to get yourself together, right? And be able to do something, right? And then after you allow yourself, because the majority of people will rush, will do the opposite thing. They will rush not to look incompetent, they will rush into answering those questions. But we have to take time, pause to think, and decide what exactly we have to answer. And that's why my second advice here would be, the first was about the preparation, right? And my second advice would be just to take a pause, allow yourself this pause, to calm down, to take a couple of breaths, and then go ahead and answer that question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's really nice. Okay, and probably the last year, based on your example with the partner, it's really interesting. So speaking about starting from the main point, what if you don't know the answer at start? What if the partner from the example needed to pass through his thinking out loud to result to have an answer?
Also a tricky one, right? Well, what I would say, you have to know, right? I mean, in the situation with a partner, of course, it was like thinking on his feet. He was thinking on the go, right? And that's why he was not prepared. But you have to be prepared. If we're speaking about some presentation, some Q&A session, you have to be prepared beforehand, and you have to have this answer. There are some exceptions, of course. For example, when your audience, you feel that your audience is resistant, and the answer that you are about to give is not something that they will like. And in this situation, of course, it would be better to start with the details, with the context, and then you will be slowly thinking about the answer, and then lead them, like gradually, lead your audience gradually to the point. But again, it has just specific situations to be applied in, and this is usually when the audience is resistant, when the audience is a bit skeptical about something that you're speaking about, or the audience is really looking for some data, some facts, before you jump into conclusion, yeah? But that's specific situations. In all the other situations, you do have to be prepared, right? And give this answer right away. That's your home task. And when you are doing the presentation, when you are answering the questions, that would be the best thing to start. With the main point.
Yeah, thank you very much. So let's move on, and I would like to continue with self-presentation. And of course, many of our probably audience, so we just had an experience with some interviews or some presentations at the university or at job probably. And of course, I understand that it's really important to make a good impression, yeah? And that's why I want to ask you, how should individuals speak about their skills, about their experiences during self-presentation, and particularly during the interview?
Fair enough, yeah. Well, the typical skill that you would need during the interview is the self-introduction skill, right? So that you could introduce yourself, your skills and experiences you've told, in a clear way, and you could persuade the other person, the interviewer, that you are a good fit for that position, right? That is why the very common question that is asked, tell me about yourself question, right? So it can be a bit different in shape, like, or guide me through your resume or CV, or do something like to explain how you moved through your career path or anything like this, right? And the expected answer is the self-introduction. And the self-introduction has to also be short and crisp, and give the, the perspective of who you are as a professional and what you are looking for at this interview, right? And that is why the technique I love a lot. It's not even a technique, I would say it's just the number of steps that you can take to, give this perspective. It is called present, past, and future. That means when you are asked the question, tell me about yourself, you can start with the present. For example, I'm Helena, I'm a soft skills trainer at EPAM, and my two focuses are cultural intelligence and presentation skills, right? So this is the first part. I'm speaking about who I am now. Now, the second step is to speak about the past. And the past is, I've been working with this topic of presentation and cultural intelligence for 10 years so far, like teaching or training the colleagues, the working professionals, the skills. And the last step would be to speak about the future. If I'm at the interview, I would say about my aspirations, or why I am here, my motivation, and what I'm about to do in the future for this company, right? And that's why I would say something like this. So, I'm here now, really excited to join your company to help your professionals, your talent, achieve your company goals in a more efficient or effective way. That would be this three-step technique for introduction, or the tell me about yourself answer. So we start with the present, then we go to the past, and then we connect it with the future.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe you have any other recommendations on presenting ourselves really effectively for others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, of course. If we, again, look into how the interview is usually structured, the interview is structured first, this tell me about yourself questions, and then there's usually a number of so-called behavioral questions, right? And those behavioral questions are aimed at revealing who you really are as a professional through your experience. And you have to share this experience to be able to, explain. You cannot just say, I am proactive. This sounds nothing. And every other person coming to the interview will tell this word, right? Or you can say, I'm punctual. But again, this is nothing. And the person who is interviewing you, who will, will be selecting you for the position, they have to be sure that you are able to deliver the goals, right? And they have to be sure who you are as a person. And that is why these behavioral questions are usually handled by the specific techniques of answer. And let me give you a couple of examples of those behavioral questions. For example, tell me about the time you made a mistake, right? Or tell me about the last time when you disagreed with your manager's opinion. Or tell me about the experience when you missed your deadline, right? So again, the aim is to reveal the typical behavior of this person in a certain situation, maybe under pressure, under stress, or something like this. And that is why what you do need to do is tell a story. And you have to give the specific example from your experience that would illustrate how you reacted, how you behaved in this situation. And what usually is recommended here to use a specific technique, which I told, this technique is called STAR. And this acronym stands for S is situation, T is task, A is action, and R is result. And now I'm about to break it down. and the situation is something that you had to deal with, the context, the details, right? For example, the sales person or the person who is applying for the sales job, they could start with the situation like this. So they could say, well, when I joined this company, or like company X, in the sales role last year, I first couldn't meet the objective, the target in terms of sales in the first quarter. This is description of the situation, right? Next up is the T, task, right? Here you have to explain what you decided to do, actually. And you can say, as a sales professional, again, you can tell, well, in this situation, I decided to work a bit more on achieving my goals and even exceed them in the second quarter, in the Q2. Now, after you're done with the task, you go to A, action. And in the action, actually, you have to showcase your capabilities, right? You have to demonstrate and be very specific about what you did, yeah, what your exact steps were. And here you can say, like, for example, and then I broke down my sales target into small steps, into small objectives. What else I did was I approached my manager for mentoring or coaching and blah, blah, blah. I approached my manager I asked them for help with handling objections, yeah? And something else, you can say what exactly you did with that. So it was STA, and now we're approaching R, the result. This is something that you received at the end, where your all effort brought you to. And this is, that might be, in our example, this might be, and like eventually, I ended up with exceeding my target by 10%. That is STAR technique, you know, and you can use every time when you're asked those behavioral questions, and even more like when you just want to illustrate what happened and that you're not just proactive, right, but you have something to back it up, to back this just simple word or empty word with some proper example.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing such a useful technique. And yeah, we have one more question. Is it possible to improve public speaking on your own?
Never thought about that. Probably it is, and it would be beneficial, because I usually recommend to practice what you've prepared, right? And when it comes to delivery, I mean, when you do deliver the speech that you have prepared, of course, that would be nice, you know, to do some practice, some rehearsal, like dry runs in front of the people. But if you don't have the people to give you feedback, of course you can do that on your own and in front of this, the mirror, like a taxi driver movie thing, right? And you can do that, absolutely, and that would be absolutely important for your final result when you go and deliver this speech, and you can. Now, if you're asking about, you know, understanding how everything works, what the structure of the presentation might be, how to prepare for the presentation, you can also do that. You can dig deeper into the internet, into LinkedIn Learning. If you win today's contest for the best question, right? And of course you can find these materials everywhere, and you can, absolutely. But I would recommend also to ask for the feedback. And the person who you can ask can be someone who you trust, someone of your peers, of your colleagues, maybe your manager, maybe somebody else, and that would benefit you even more.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, and when we give speeches or presentations, of course, it's important to convince and engage our audience. And what do you think we can do to make our speeches and presentations better and more convincing?
I would mention probably a couple of things, where the first one, when it comes to being able to persuade someone, you have to be specific. and you have to refer to facts and figures, something tangible, right? Not just, again, with that example of being proactive or being like punctual. You'd better say, instead of saying I am proactive or I am punctual, okay, let's take this example with being punctual. Instead of this word, you can say, for my career, I've never missed a deadline. So I was always on time for the meetings, and I've missed only once because of some objective reasons. This is specific. And what makes other people believe you is raw facts. And this is something that you can use. And instead of saying I'm an excellent salesperson, you can tell I've not exceeded, but I've increased the sales of this company in last year by 15%, right? So the figures talk for itself. And that's why my first recommendation would be to be specific and to refer to facts and figures, and avoid very general comments, general the descriptors, yeah? So just get down to the main point. Now, my next advice would be totally different. I would say opposite from something that I've just told. Because something that I've just told describes this rational part of our presentation, and still there is something which is more creative. And we sometimes can be persuaded by some more emotional thing than just a fact or a figure. And this emotional thing is revealed usually by a story. So the second thing I would recommend doing is telling the stories. Using the STAR technique, using any other frameworks that maybe I will be speaking about today, but also think about the story.
Yeah. So, and just to continue, the power of storytelling is often emphasized in presentations. And what is the role of this storytelling during our presentation?
The role is huge. Yeah, as I told, you can be persuasive with facts, with figures, with analytics, with statistics, with everything rational, absolutely. But what happens, well, that usually does not resonate with the human nature. But if you look back into some prehistoric times, what we did as people who did not have this modern infrastructure, did not have this modern works, we shared our experience with the help of a story. So this was the only way how we could transmit our experience from the older generation to the younger generation. That's why the story is something very natural to a person, and this, resonates with the person's nature, because it connects not with the rational part, but with the emotional part. People usually start, being compassionate about you when you tell a story. People usually recognize themselves in your stories, right? And that's why they tend to be persuaded more. So that is the question, probably. And so in modern presentation, there should be two things combined, right? So the facts and figures and the story. And that is why actually the TED Talk format is so popular. If you pay attention to something that they do, they tell stories, and very often they tell their personal stories. They speak about themselves, not somebody else, and that is why it's so captivating, and that is why we're so drawn to the people who are doing something at TED Talk. So the story is absolutely vital.
Yeah. So, and when it comes to creating a presentation, the design of slides, in general, can play an important role in helping to express some key points. And I would like to ask you, probably you have any tips or tricks for designing slides that can help us to illustrate the point we would like to share with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of my favorite parts in presentation, and specifically in planning and preparing presentation, the slides. I love making slides. And what I would recommend, when you are about to create slides for your presentation, first of all, I would recommend to start with a speech, not the slides, right? So decide what you're going to speak about, what your goal is, who your audience is, blah, blah, blah. Prepare the speech, and then go to slides part. And what you have to do when you approach this stage of your preparation, you have to ask yourself two questions. Now, the first question is, do you need the slides in the first place? Maybe you don't need them. Maybe that's quite enough that you are here with your idea, and you can just help like with your words and like put your message, set your message across with the help of your words, and that would be enough, right? And maybe the slides would be distracting in this situation. That is one question. And if you answer yes, you can go further, follow to the second question, which is who's the main character here in this story? I mean, is it you who plays the main role in the presentation? Or is it slide that plays this role? What I mean is you have to decide what is going to be happening further with that slides. If you just need to create them to send them to someone, and then they will be referring to them as, you know, like kind of like materials, additional materials, like appendixes or something else, okay, you can put all the information there. They can be text heavy. They can contain the complex diagrams. They can contain the tables, figures, and so on, right? It is possible. But if you are the main character, and if it's you who gives the information, the slides have to be absolutely simple, clear, and elegant. And you will use the slides as a support, because what we commonly deal with when presenting something, or okay, not presenting, but watching presentation, we see the slide, which is like absolutely crammed with the text, with the diagrams, with the figures, and when the audience is trying to make sense of something the speaker is saying, they're not listening at all, right? So they're trying to make sense what is written there on the slide, and they're trying to read those headlines and understand why this diagram is there, right? So absolutely not, no speaker here. And when I find myself in the place of this person, I mean, who is trying to make sense in the audience, I feel absolutely exhausted after a minute or two of such a presentation. So that means that we have to be absolutely able to put ourselves in the shoes, in the place of our audience, and think, and what if now I'm speaking and the audience sees the slide that I'm showing? Aren't they distracted by this, right? So, and if so, you have to get rid of the majority of things that you're putting on the slides and keep it clear and simple. And you have to remember that the slide is something that explains your point, not adds up to your point. Yeah, so it should be just like helping to explain. That's why a couple of words, like a couple of sentences, that's why one simple diagram will be absolutely fine for the slide if you are playing the main part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I hope that your recommendations will be really helpful for our audience. And let's continue with presentations. And what about cultural differences in presentations?
Mm-hmm. Another wonderful question. And let me tell you a story.
Okay.
Because we have just discussed this power of storytelling. I have a nice story about this because when I joined EPAM, like 2 or 3, I can't even remember, years ago, I started working in this cultural intelligence unit with 2 of my colleagues. One of my colleagues was Lena, who's from Belarus, and the other one was Andy, or Andrei, who's originally from the UK. And like basically we were working together. And what was happening when we met together and discussed the training content, they had a bit of a, I wouldn't say the conflict, but they discussed what way of training is better. So Lena was insisting on this way, this flow. You start with a theoretical background, and then you go to the example illustrating this theoretical background. At the same time, Andy has been promoting a totally different approach, which was like flipped, right? So this approach was flipped. He told that, no, first we have to start with the example. We have to start with the situation so that our colleagues who we're going to train will be able to identify the situation and, you know, relate to it. And then back it up with some theoretical data and research data from the cultural standpoint, right? And like, you know, they couldn't find this, the common ground here. And what we noticed that actually that was a cultural thing, and that is closely connected with the presentation or the way how we used to perceive the information, understand the information. In some cultures, it is quite typical to receive the background first, the details, the theory of the concept first, and the how is more important than, the why is more important than how, right? Those cultures are Eastern European cultures. Some of other European cultures, like French culture, for example. Those cultures are Asian cultures, like India. Those cultures are Latin American cultures, like Mexico and Colombia and Argentina, right? And in the cultures that I've just mentioned, they tend to start with the context, with the details, right? Something that I was speaking about when I was describing this case with my partner, right? Yeah, he was trying to, you know, describe things and then go to the main point. And this is very natural for the representatives of that cultures. And that's why Lena advocated this approach. Now, Andy was a representative of Anglo-Saxon culture, not was, but is a representative of Anglo-Saxon culture, and they are used to beginning the point with the main thing, first of all, and with the practical thing, with the illustration how some concept works, and then supported by the principles, supported by the theory, and all the stuff that is needed to understand. And that is why he advocated this approach. How to find the common ground here is actually, it depends on what kind of audience you have. If you do have the monocultural audience, that would be better if you flexibly adjust to the style of this audience. For example, if you present to the representatives of Argentina, you can go ahead and start with the context, and that would be absolutely fine. If you present to the representatives of, like, for example, to the US customer, US client, right, you can adjust to their style and begin with the main point and then back it up if needed, right? Back it up if needed with the details and context. And still, for myself, I've adopted something like a hybrid approach for mixed audiences, because something that the audience that I usually work here at EPAM is international, all over the globe. And that is why I do several things. I start with the example. I start with something clear to the person so that the person could relate to that. Then I back it up with the details. And then again, I return to the same situation or to the main point. So that's my would be my point here, just to handle both type, monocultural audience and multicultural audience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your opinion here. And
sure.
Just to continue the theme about presentations, of course, as I understand, and in general, it's really important for everyone to make our presentations really good. But sometimes we can make some mistakes and it can affect our presentation.
Mm.
And that's why I'm curious, what about some common presentation mistakes that we should be careful about?
Love the question. This is something actually that I'm covering usually with the colleagues. And speaking of mistakes, the most common mistakes, probably the most common would be not considering the audience specifics when you prepare the presentation. So knowing your audience is absolutely vital, and this is the first step that you have to do as a part of your preparation. For example, if I were to pitch, or if I were approached by my manager and I was asked of the benefit, like to prepare the presentation on the benefits of ChatGPT, my first question would be, for whom? Who are those people who are going to be like listening to this? And depending on their answer, my manager's answer, I would probably prepare different presentations for different audiences. For example, or I would combine it for if my audience is mixed, right? So my question would be, others for students or others for working professionals? And what kind of benefits are you expecting from me if I don't know who these people would be to benefit from it, right? And I can end up with several presentations for several audiences, and this is the right approach. When if you can, handle this, you have to absolutely divide those audiences, understand their needs, understand what they already know about this, understand how exactly they expect us to cover this topic, and go to each of these audiences, bringing them their own benefits. So that would be the correct step. And again, you will end up with 4 completely different presentations, though the headline will be the same, right? So that was the first one. The first mistake that people don't consider the audience. The second one would be probably about that usually someone who is preparing the presentation treats presentation as monologue, right? So we're used to coming to someone who is going to be listening, whether it's one person or several people or like people at the conference, and we think that we have to just tell them something. But that's a common misconception. And what we have to now aim at is creating this dialogue, right? So that's a two-way road here, and we need to be able to involve the audience, engage the audience by the questions, and that would be important for us probably to learn those techniques, how to engage this audience, to keep them interested first of all, and then secondly to flexibly adjust something that we're speaking about or how we're speaking after we receive this tiny portion of feedback from them, right? And this is something that I would tell as a second common mistake. Now a couple more. The mistake with the language, and I've just talked about language not being inclusive, and we have to strive for being inclusive in our language. And once I was someone who gave feedback to one of our colleagues who created the presentation about the leaders. Usually the qualities of the leaders are told to be humble, hungry, humble, smart, right? And I can see the text on this presentation, and the speaker was saying the same words. Leader is a person who the continuation of the sentence, and then he usually does this and that. And here we stopped, my eye stopped a bit, and then I can see this is the man who and stuff. And what do you mean that's a man if we are now speaking more and more about the inclusive society? And that is why you have to be absolutely clear in your language that your language is inclusive as well. That you don't say he referring to anybody. Usually you say leader is the person who, and you continue, and then they would be a good way to refer to this person again, not just he. You can also use he or she to make your language inclusive, right? This is not very obvious now specifically for some of the languages, speakers of some of the languages, but now more and more we face the situation when we have to be creating the focus on how inclusive our English is, right?
Yeah, thank you. So we discussed a little bit our audience, and so let's imagine that the presentation is ready and it's time to present it to our audience. Let's talk about interacting with the audience, and what about some probably techniques for influencing and engaging the audience effectively, and maybe you can share some of these techniques with us.
Okay, that is an easy question for me, because I have some universal tool for audience engagement. Of course, connecting that with my previous comment on that we have to be able to create this dialogue out of the presentation, it is important to know how exactly to do that. And as I told, there's a universal tool for that, and this tool is a question. So we can just ask questions and receive answers, and that would absolutely work. And those questions can be of different types. That can be open question when you receive the answers, and it will work like absolutely effectively in the small group with the small audience, for example, the team, the peers, like some investors whom you pitch to, or like anybody else, like a small group, and then you can like give out one piece of your presentation and then stop and ask, and what do you think? And what do you think, is it like this one or that one for you, right? And after that you go on with the next part. And that's the simple thing with an open question. But it is like a bit difficult when you have a huge audience, for example, at the conference, or you have some online town hall or something else, and you have to speak. And in this situation, you have to recreate or change this open question into the closed question. And these closed questions can be yes or no, and can require the answer yes or no. For example, have you ever felt burnt out? This is a yes or no question, and you can ask people here, being here in the live presentation, just raise your hand if the answer is yes. So please raise your hands if you have ever been burnt out. Or please post some emoji or some reaction if we're in the online context, right? And that would be absolutely easy to think about the question and then transform it to yes or no question. That would work absolutely fine, and it's the cheapest way how you can engage your audience.
Yeah, thank you. And what about the speaker during the presentation? So maybe you can tell something about the speaker.
Would you know the speaker, probably the way how they have to keep with the audience?
Yeah, keep this audience.
Well, the important point here should be probably that they have, apart from the speech that they are making, they have to be in control of some other things, like their body language and intonation as well. And speaking of body language, it is important to know both, by the way, body language and intonation. It is important to know that there are, two channels how we communicate with the audience. The first channel is verbal, right? And they're hearing what we're saying, right? And either agree or disagree with that. They can relate or cannot relate, doesn't matter, but it's verbal. Now, still, that's main channel, but still there is another one, which is quite subtle. And this is so-called meta message. If we have the verbal message, the main one, we can also have the meta message, which is about how people behave. If you look at the speaker who is presenting, whether they look confident or not, whether they sound with their intonation confident or not, because sometimes when we speak and the the words themselves say that, oh, yes, I am a great professional, I have a lot of expertise. But at the same time, they're doing like this, and they're speaking, yeah, I think that I deserve this job, right? And this is the meta message, right? You read right now that I am not confident about something that I'm talking about. So that means you have to pay attention to something you are doing with your body and you're doing with your intonation. Speaking of body, I usually recommend to just make yourself comfortable, and that helps a lot, because when you feel comfortable in the body, in the space, this is transmitted to your audience, and they read this as a confidence, right? And what else I recommend is just avoid the closed positions like I've just shown. That's a simple one. Everybody tells about it. But what else I usually speak about is the new presenters, new speakers, the newbie in this field. They tend to make same. I wouldn't say that's a mistake, but they tend to make the same gesture when they speak. They usually keep this position, having their hands like this. And someone from my one of my trainings has called this position as I was playing with the glue and I lost. So what I'm speaking about, this position is not very comfortable, you know. So it's not natural actually for a person like do like this, because when I try to do that even now, I often miss. So it's not natural, right? And that is why this position, you know, gives out that the speaker is new, then they don't know how to do that. And that is why what I usually recommend, how to keep the body, again, first of all, comfortable. If you're standing, you have to be standing stable, not closing your legs and your arms, and you have to be opening. You can keep your hands right here in front of you, either opened or closed together, but you have to be opening from times to times to the audience and use your gestures. But again, you have to use your gestures to explain something, right? So if you're speaking about the process, you can say that was a process, and your gestures explain. That was a circle, you can explain that with your gestures. But sometimes I notice this opposite, specifically when we communicate with someone online and we're doing the presentation online and the screen is somewhere like a bit below of our eye level, we start, you know, chaotic gestures, and it doesn't help actually. And that is why something that I would recommend is just, you know, be comfortable and keep your gestures to the minimum. And if you do use the gestures, so let them be explanatory, not, you know, hindering your message. And another thing is intonation. And speaking of intonation, I would say that quite often we don't even realize that we speak very high, at a very high pitch, specifically when we are worried, nervous before the presentation. We start speaking very high. And still there's a study that showed that you are like credible in the eyes of your audience when you speak low voice. I mean, at a not low voice, but at a lower pitch of your voice. And that might be helpful as well, just to notice these things and keep it to the lower pitch when you're speaking. So that increases the trust and credibility of the audience. And another thing here connected with the voice is also pauses. Quite often we avoid pauses when we are speaking, and that's not the way to go, because actually we think that you would better rush and speak quickly, but what is happening on the other side, when somebody is listening to us, they have to understand, they have to make sense from the complex ideas, right? Because now we're giving them something probably totally new, and they have to have time to digest this. And that is why it is the opposite. You have to make a pause after you've given out a block of your information. You have to stop like a second or two, at least, to take a breath for yourself, to remember what you're going to speak about next, and give the audience this pause to digest something that you've told. that's actually it about the body language and the meta message.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I would like to continue with presentation, and of course, presenting in front of audience can be really stressful. And of course, especially for those who just don't have much experience with presentations. And could you please share with us probably some tips of overcoming nervousness and handling such unexpected challenges?
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that, because like 40 minutes ago when we were about to start this stream, I was doing something that I'm gonna share now, because I was anxious about the thing that is about to happen, the stream. And moreover, I usually feel like nervous before some public social situation, public speaking situation, and I have to say that it is okay to be nervous. And if somebody sees that you are nervous, they can not only, not even, that's not the word I have to put it into. What I meant was, you think usually that if somebody else can see that you're nervous, their trust will decrease, right? But sometimes it works a bit different way. When somebody else sees that you're nervous, the trust can grow because they see that you're a human, same as they are. And that is okay to be nervous. That's quite usual for all of us. Like the 99% are nervous before they start speaking, right? And I would recommend to embrace this fact, that it is quite okay to be in, even if somebody sees that, even if you forget a word for a moment, that would be not the very, you know, there won't be very adverse the adverse results of that. And what I would recommend, something that I was doing before we started, I was breathing, you know, the simple thing. And I'm gonna now share the technique that I use all the time when I feel that now another wave of anxiety is approaching. I start breathing, and first I'm gonna explain why I'm doing that, and then I'm gonna share the technique. So breathing, again, I love this cheap ways to achieve results. Yeah, I told that asking a question is a cheap way to attract the audience's attention. And in this case, breathing is a cheap way to calm yourself down, because it doesn't require any other resources than just you sitting somewhere, right? So you don't need like any space, you don't need to involve other people or buy something or doing something, yeah? You have to just sit and breathe, and it's very cheap and it's very effective, right? And when you breathe, you stop catastrophizing things, and you are not in your imagination anymore, and you switch to here and now. And you probably heard of some techniques to overcome the panic attacks. They return you to this present moment, and then they recommend to start breathing. They recommend to touch things, to you know, reinforce the sensory things, right? And breathing is the same. You stop being in your catastrophe in your head, inside of your hand, and you return to now. And that is why when you're following your breath, how is it inside of you? Is it warm or is it cold? Then how many seconds are you breathing in, and for how many seconds you're breathing out? It returns you to now, and you're not afraid anymore, right? And now you understand that there is no catastrophe. That's a typical situation at work or like somewhere else. And the technique I usually use is called box breathing. It's called a box breathing because it's kind of looks like the figure that we're about to imagine. It looks like a box. And as you know, the box can have this several sides, right? We will be imagining like two sides, and then there's the top and the bottom. And you assign your inhale and exhale to specific sides. For example, your inhale will be a top side of the box, then exhale will be the bottom side of the box, and something on the sides is going to be the pauses between the inhale and the exhale. The next thing you do, you assign the number of seconds that you will be inhaling and exhaling. For example, 3 seconds. And then you go like this, right? So you inhale 3 seconds, then you make a pause, 3 seconds, then you exhale 3 seconds. Then again, pause, then again inhale 3 seconds, and go on, right? So several times you do these boxes. I mean, you do this several boxes, like 4 or 5. You can even extend each of the sides, and you see that we're here and now and everything's fine, and I can go ahead and start doing my thing.
Yeah, thank you. I will try it when I will be nervous.
Yeah, absolutely try.
Thank you very much. So I think that we can finish, and thank you very much for answers. It was like really great and helpful. And I propose our audience to continue with QA session, yeah, because during our conversation, our audience left some interesting questions.
Sure.
And just to remind you that for the best questions, for the most inspiring and exciting questions, you can receive a 1-year LinkedIn Learning subscription. And I think that now, with our speaker together, we will choose probably top 3 questions, yeah, and then our support team in the chat will contact you for a prize. So some questions were answered during our conversation, and I would like to continue with additional. Okay, let's start with the first one. In continuation of challenging questions topic, is it okay to admit that you don't know something? For example, during the interview, I think. So what is your opinion?
It is absolutely okay. And moreover, if you feel like an alternative, try to think about something that is not true, that is absolutely not recommended. You'd better say, sorry, I don't know, and offer the alternative. You can start with, I'm not sure I can answer this question right now. That can be a phrase, right? And then you can either give the reasons first, or just jump into giving the answer. And, I mean, not the answer, but the alternative, how you will be providing the answer. Maybe I now need to check, give me a second, and I'm going to check and return to you, or I'm going to email you about that, or I'm going to do something else. If that's, or I'm going to readdress you to the other person. And if that is happening at the interview, during the interview, of course, you have to somehow softly say that you're not ready to answer now, but think about why they ask this question. And if you find the reason why they ask this question, you might give a different answer that would actually match the same goal. So don't be afraid, again, to communicate with the interviewer, with the TA, and don't be afraid to ask and why you asked. Maybe I'm gonna give some other alternative, right? So that would be absolutely fine. But of course, lying is no go. So you mustn't lie.
Yeah, thank you very much. So one more question: who is your role model in terms of delivering persuasive and eloquent speeches?
That's a tough one. I'm not sure. I do not have probably the role model. I love observing people, though. I really am excited observing how people do their speeches. And I quite often try to watch something, both, for example, the TED Talks, or some famous people talking, like Steve Jobs is famous for his eloquence and the great selling speeches, yeah. And I love observing someone from inside of the company when somebody does their speech. And for what I do, and I would recommend everybody doing, is try and notice what exactly they did that you liked it. You know, kind of re-engineer their speeches and then grab something that you loved, grab some tool or technique or approach that they used and recreate it in your presentation. And this is what I do. And that's why I cannot come up with some single person, but I really love observing people speaking, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So, and just a funny question. Helena, do you usually prepare any jokes to establish a better contact with the audience? If yes, tell us the joke that you have prepared for today's event.
Bravo. I have not prepared any jokes, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I don't know, because, you know, the topic of jokes is quite a tricky one. And now I'm going to explain why I have not prepared and why that's the tricky one. You know, jokes are usually understandable, are clear, and can be related to and can be shared by quite a specific number of people, right? Quite a specific group of people. They can be, if I start joking about, I don't know, Marvel movies or connected with Marvel movies, all the other people who don't watch Marvel movies or are not involved in the topic of superheroes, they might feel, you know, you know, how to say that in the correct way, out of the group, right, that I'm referring to. Again, some of the jokes might be only about one specific culture, and the people from other culture will not understand the joke. And another type of the jokes that can be only clear to my age group, for millennials, and the Zoomers or the Generation X will not understand them. And that is why actually I really love jokes. But when you do the joke, when you start joking, you have to be absolutely clear about who these people are, and that you can anticipate their reaction to the jokes. And the jokes are not usually recommended for the mixed audience from different backgrounds, from different cultures, and from different generations, right? And what I also recommend is to, as this person asked, to prepare the jokes, and not only prepare them, but test them on the focus group, which is very similar to the audience you're going to be working with. And that would be absolutely, you know, zero chance of failure, yeah, this way. And that is why I don't usually prepare jokes. Although that might be a great tool, absolutely great tool to create this contact. And if you know your audience, that would be absolutely nice icebreaker to start with a joke.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I would like to continue with the next question, and let it be, okay, if you are in an interview for your first job and you are not so strong with the hard skills, what points to emphasize when introducing yourself in the situation? Maybe some other tips.
So if you don't have the strong hard skills,
hard
right?
skills.
Yeah, you can focus on your background, I mean the academic background and your education, and something that you've done important that you've done at your university. So first of all, you can focus on the as I told, academic background, what you feel more successful in, which field you feel more successful in, and why you feel so, and what you have done there. I mean, maybe you have participated in some hackathons, or maybe you've participated in creation of some initiative inside of the university and stuff and focus on that. And of course you have to be focusing on soft skills, and you have to highlight which soft skills you consider your main areas, like for example the presentation, that you're absolutely fascinated to present things to people and you know how to do that, or you have leadership skills and you could, for example, arrange the group of your peers to do some project, yeah, or you have, I don't know, conflict solution skills and you will back it up with a story, how you were able to resolve the conflict within someone and someone, yeah. So, of course, the academic background, maybe some volunteering, maybe some of your hobbies that can show who you actually are as a person, and then the focus on the soft skills. This is something that I can reply just thinking on my feet.
Yeah, thanks for your opinion. One more. I would like to start a YouTube channel sharing some knowledge, as I think intonation and pronunciation are key elements to capture the viewer. So the question is, what are some ways to improve pronunciation and intonation?
Interesting question, and I guess the mimicking would help you. What I mean is, you know, I've just remembered this type of TikToks when some people are just mimicking some other people. You know, they just repeat the words that they're saying. And when I saw these types of videos on TikTok, I couldn't understand why you know, do that. Why is that for? Just people repeating the word by word the things that other people say, and I couldn't find the sense in that. But it can have absolute value for those who want to be speaking as native speakers or close them, or be good at some non-native for them language. And you can just, you know, take somebody who you feel you have to be similar to in your speech, in your intonation, and just take one small piece of their speech on YouTube, for example, and then try to reproduce their intonation and reproduce their pronunciation, and that would be fine. And as the more obvious thing, so this is something that I've just come up with, right? But something from the more obvious stuff, it can be like just taking a course in English and intonation, pronunciation, because they are not the main focus usually, but they are the quite a big part in the language studies, and that's why you can just find a course like this.
Yeah, thank you very much. So one more. I'm wondering how to balance being myself while also adhering to recommended poses, gestures and body language. What if some of these suggestions feel a bit unnatural to me?
Also, an interesting question, because I, of course, usually recommend to be yourself. And if something is not natural and you want to, you know, change this behavior, I mean, we want to behave in a different way, and it hinders the message, so don't do it, right? So you'd better be yourself, natural, with all those, you know, gestures, with all those wrong intonations, no pauses, and something else. At first, stay. First of all, you have to become comfortable at your role, and you have to become comfortable being here with the audience, saying something, and then after you're comfortable with this skill, yeah, so you have you can take the second step in these long stairs. And you can work on your body language and intonation, right? And but first, become comfortable with just the speaking, and then try working on the intonation. So, but anyway, regardless of all the advice, first thing, be yourself.
Thanks. So I think that it looks like we are running out of time, but there are a lot of questions, and I propose you to answer the rest, but really short, yeah, just in several points. So how valuable is ability to speak multiple languages in software development besides English, which is obviously dominant?
Well, I believe it's something that I cannot answer in a full way, but of course it is a valuable skill because quite often when you work with several locations, that would be nice, specifically with the customers, right? From several locations. That would be nice if you speak with the customer their language.
Thank you. So, how to ask a question with explaining the situation as short as possible?
I'm afraid I can't make sense of this question. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like it's really a little
Can
bit
you
strange.
repeat that? Maybe I will.
So the question is how to ask a question with explaining the situation as short as possible.
How to ask a
How to
question?
compose this question and to be really short.
The explain the situation seems not a
Yeah.
question to me, and I'm so sorry. You'd better clarify the question. We have to.
Yeah,
we
you
have to
can.
ask
We have time, and you can just left more notes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, how can we adapt our communication style to different audiences and contexts to ensure clarity and persuasiveness?
Thank you for the question. Well, I think I've covered partly. You can, of course, adjust to the cultural to the culture, yeah, and I told that for some cultures that is more natural to begin with the main point, and for some cultures it's more natural to begin with the background. At least you can do that one, although you don't have to actually, yeah. So if you're more comfortable staying with your own style, that is also fine. You have the right for it, yeah, absolutely. But if you really like seek for the understanding by this audience, yeah, you can start with the culture, you can start with the style, how they perceive information better, visual information in the form of text, what kind of audience is that, technical people or business people. If there's the technical people, probably they will be looking into more into processes, if they're like in details, and if they're business people, they will be looking more for the long-term benefit for the business, for the project, right? And you have to be able to adjust to their needs, right? If that's non-technical audience, you have to be clearly able to explain very complex technical concepts to the non-technical audience as well. Yeah, and this is another skill, a different skill. And that's the right question in the way that you do have to adjust, yeah, if you want to transmit your message in a clear and persuasive way. And that's the several options that I gave you. So culture, tech, non-tech, business, and maybe some other like, I'm not speaking about the age and the gender, but just you have to be able to create a persona, right, of your audience. Who's there in your audience? So create several personas for them and adjust your presentation to those ones.
Yeah, thank you. So the next one, do you use ChatGPT or other AI solutions to prepare for public presentations?
Absolutely, yes. And now that we have ChatGPT, that's a nice thing to use when you're preparing. And where I personally use ChatGPT is, first of all, finding a backup for my ideas, finding some statistics. Though you have to like double check, you have to fact check after you have used ChatGPT, but still I do need. For example, I told about this Forbes study at the very beginning. I did find that via ChatGPT actually. Now another thing how I do use ChatGPT is stories. Another thing that I've talked about several times, you can ask ChatGPT to, like, you can give them theoretical thing, like for example, people in India burn out at work blah blah blah, and then ask them to give a specific example for it, right? Or you can ask several ways how to stop burnout, and ask them to give the examples, proper examples, how exactly you can avoid the burnout. And you can ask them create a story about, yeah? And that would be absolutely a great tool for creating the content.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So thank you very much for your answers. They were really helpful. And for our audience, I know that there are some questions left, and you can just leave this message once again in the chat. And I hope that our speaker probably later will answer these questions, because
I'll try to.
There are a lot of questions, really. Okay, and I would like to probably continue with some words, and once again I would like to say thank you to our speaker. It was a pleasure really to be with you today, and thanks for joining us today. Thanks for your knowledge, for your experience. So really, thank you.
So much. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And also I would like to say thank you to our audience for joining us today, and I think that this stream was a really good experience for you for a future career. And by the way, to make the first steps in the future career, you can join our training center, and as I said, in the video stream description you can find useful links and search for available opportunities for beginners. So and as I said at the beginning, we are planning to start a new series of our streams, soft skill streams, and I would like to ask our audience to leave in the chat some options and opinions, like what themes you want to hear during our next streams, and I think that we can choose some of them. By the way, regarding our QA session, we planned to choose top 3 questions, and probably you just can share with me some interesting questions, and we can just reward our participants.
I mean, that's gonna be tough. I love the questions. I really love the questions. I still remember only one though, and that was about whether or not I have prepared the joke. Absolutely sure that it's a nice question, not only because that was addressed to me and my experience, but because it really touched upon a very interesting topic of to do or not to do, to joke or not to joke, right?
Yeah.
So this one, like absolutely the first one in my top 3, but I don't quite remember. Can you maybe remind a couple more specifically from the first part?
I think that less of questions we can just again find in the chat, and our moderators can probably just write to these participants and also just share with the details about this prize. And as you remember, it was a 1-year LinkedIn Learning subscription, so top 1 we just we just named before. Okay, so and just to sum up, I would like to say again thank you to everyone, and just stay tuned for our upcoming events and explore our opportunities at training.epam.com. So see you soon, and thank you once again. Bye and have a nice day.
Have an absolutely great day.